The moment Brandon Cole saw his own eyes staring back at him from a 6-year-old girl's face on a LinkedIn photo, his entire world collapsed into a single, suffocating truth. He was a father, and he had abandoned them both. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Linda's Stories. If hope has carried you this far, like this video. If love still lives in your heart, comment. I'm with Linda. Let's begin. The rain hammered against the windshield of Brandon's rented Tesla as he sat parked across the street from the modest 2-story house in Portland's Selwood neighborhood. November in Oregon meant perpetual gray skies and streets that smelled like wet cedar and fallen leaves. He'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Through the living room window, he could see warm yellow light and shadows moving inside. A woman's silhouette, a smaller one darting past, his daughter. The photo had appeared 3 days ago on Marcus Henderson's LinkedIn feed, a casual post about a successful community fundraiser. Marcus, an old college buddy who'd moved to Portland 5 years back, had tagged several people in the photo. Brandon almost scrolled past it, distracted during a board meeting when his brain registered the face. Melissa Richardson, still beautiful, her dark skin glowing under the event tent's string lights, her natural hair pulled back in an elegant twist. But it wasn't Melissa who'd made his breath catch. It was the little girl beside her, wearing a purple raincoat and gap-toothed grin, looking up at her mother with absolute adoration. The resemblance was undeniable. Those were his eyes, that distinctive amber brown that ran in the Cole family. His grandmother's eyes, his sister's eyes, the shape of the girl's face, the way her smile tilted slightly higher on the left side. It was like looking at his childhood photos brought to life in miniature. Brandon had immediately messaged Marcus, keeping it casual. "Hey man, who's the kid with Melissa Richardson? Didn't know she had a daughter." Marcus had replied within an hour. "Yeah, that's Harper. Great kid. Melissa's been raising her solo since she moved here from Seattle." "Why, you know Melissa." Harper. His daughter's name was Harper. 7 years. He'd spent 7 years building Cole Development into a $200 million real estate empire, buying luxury condos in San Francisco and Miami, dating models and socialites, attending charity galas where he wrote 6-figure checks to look magnanimous. 7 years living like Melissa Richardson had never existed, like their 8 months together hadn't meant anything, like the last words he'd said to her hadn't been cruel enough to haunt him in the rare moments he allowed himself to remember. "I'll never love a woman like you, Melissa. You want things I can't give. You want a life I don't want. We're done." She'd been standing in his penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows behind her, her face carefully composed, even though he could see the devastation in her eyes. It was March 2018. He was 31. She was 26. She'd just gotten promoted to senior graphic designer at the marketing firm, where they'd met during a business pitch. She was brilliant, creative, grounded in a way that both fascinated and frightened him. She made him want things he'd spent his entire adult life avoiding: stability, commitment, vulnerability. So he pushed her away with the cruelest words he could find. Because fear made him vicious, she'd left without crying, without begging, without giving him the dramatic scene his subconscious had probably expected. She'd simply said, "I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, Brandon," and walked out of his apartment, out of his building, out of his life. He'd never called, never texted. He'd blocked her number after 2 weeks because seeing her name in his contacts made his chest ache in ways he didn't want to examine. He'd told himself it was for the best. She deserved better than someone emotionally unavailable. She'd move on, find someone worthy of her. He'd convinced himself this was noble, this abandonment. But she'd been pregnant. 6 weeks pregnant, Marcus had eventually told him after Brandon pressed for details. She found out a few weeks after she moved to Portland, decided to keep the baby and raise her alone. She's an amazing mom, man. Harper's lucky to have her. Now Brandon was here, 3,000 miles from his San Francisco headquarters, sitting in the rain outside the home of the woman he'd destroyed, hoping for a chance to meet the daughter he'd never known existed. The front door opened. Melissa stepped onto the porch, helping Harper with her backpack. The girl was taller than he'd expected, all long limbs and energy, wearing jeans and a blazer's hoodie. Her hair was in 2 puffs on either side of her head, tied with purple ribbons. She said something that made Melissa laugh, a sound that carried across the quiet residential street and pierced straight through Brandon's carefully constructed defenses. He'd forgotten how Melissa's laugh sounded. Like music, like home. Before he could second-guess himself, Brandon opened the car door and stepped into the rain. He'd worn a Patagonia jacket and jeans, trying to look approachable rather than like the millionaire CEO in designer suits. His heart hammered as he crossed the street, his shoes squelching in a puddle. Melissa noticed him when he was halfway up her walkway. Her entire body went rigid, her hand instinctively moving to Harper's shoulder, pulling the girl slightly behind her. The laughter died on her face, replaced by an expression Brandon couldn't quite read. Shock, anger, something harder, more protective. "Melissa," he said, stopping at the bottom of her porch steps. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "Please, I just want to talk. How did you find us?" Her voice was steady, but he could hear the steel underneath. This wasn't the soft-spoken woman he remembered. 7 years of single motherhood had forged her into something stronger, sharper. LinkedIn, Marcus posted a photo. "I saw Harper and He swallowed hard. "I know I have no right to be here, but I need to know. Is she mine?" Harper peered around her mother's hip, curious amber brown eyes studying this strange man in their yard. "Mommy, who's that?" Melissa's jaw tightened. She crouched down to Harper's level, never taking her eyes off Brandon. "Baby, go inside and get your lunchbox ready. I'll be there in 1 minute." "But 1 minute, Harper. Please." The girl hesitated, then nodded and disappeared into the house, glancing back once before closing the door. The moment she was gone, Melissa straightened and descended the porch steps, closing the distance between them until they were separated by less than 3 feet. Up close, he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her hair at the temples. She'd aged, but God, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "You need to leave," Melissa said quietly. "Right now. Just tell me, is Harper mine? Does it matter? You made your choice 7 years ago, Brandon. You told me you'd never love a woman like me, remember? So why the hell would I let you anywhere near my daughter?" "Our daughter," he corrected and immediately regretted it when her eyes flashed with fury. "No, my daughter. I carried her. I birthed her. I've raised her alone while you were off building your empire and dating Instagram models. I saw the Forbes profile, by the way. San Francisco's most eligible bachelor. Congratulations. You got exactly what you wanted." The words hit like physical blows. "Melissa, if you'd known what? You would have swooped in and played dad for a few months before deciding it was too hard? Before telling her you'd never love a girl like her?" Melissa's voice cracked slightly on the last words, the first sign of the pain beneath her anger. "I protected her from that. From you. She's had a stable, loving childhood with a mother who chose her every single day. She doesn't need a father who sees her as an obligation. That's not... I wouldn't..." Brandon struggled for words, rain running down his face. "I was an idiot. I was scared and stupid, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back. But please, Melissa, please let me try. Let me know her. Let me be part of her life." "Why? Because your ego can't handle the fact that there's a cold air you didn't know about? Because you want to ease your guilty conscience? Because she's my daughter!" The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. "Because I've spent 7 years pretending I didn't care about anything, and it's been eating me alive. Because the moment I saw her face, I felt something I haven't felt since the last time I saw you. Like maybe I could be better than the asshole I've been. Please, Melissa, I'm begging you." Melissa stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. The rain fell harder, drumming on the pavement, soaking through their clothes. Finally she spoke, her voice so quiet he almost didn't hear it over the storm. "You said you'd never love a woman like me. You made that perfectly clear. So here's the truth, Brandon. Harper doesn't need your love either. We're doing just fine without you." She turned and walked back up the porch steps. Brandon's throat tightened with panic. "Melissa, wait!" She paused at her front door, hand on the knob, but didn't turn around. "I need to think, and you need to leave before Harper sees you and starts asking questions I'm not ready to answer. If you care about her at all, you'll respect that." The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like the end of everything. Brandon stood in the rain for another full minute, staring at the warm yellow light spilling from the windows, imagining the life happening inside those walls, a life he'd forfeited, a daughter who didn't know his name. Then he turned and walked back to his car, the weight of 7 years of mistakes pressing down on his shoulders like the leaden Oregon sky. But he wasn't leaving Portland. Not yet. Not when he'd just found them. Inside the house, Melissa leaned against the closed door, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Her hands were shaking. Her daughter's voice called from the kitchen, asking if the strange man was gone, and Melissa closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing before she answered. Brandon Cole was back. The man who'd shattered her heart was standing in her driveway, claiming he wanted to be her father. And the most terrifying part was the tiny, traitorous voice in the back of her mind, whispering that maybe Harper deserved a chance to know him, even if Melissa never could forgive him for what he'd done. Brandon didn't sleep that night. His hotel room at the Kimpton River Place overlooked the Willamette River, the city lights reflecting off the dark water like scattered stars. He'd chosen Portland's nicest boutique hotel out of habit, the top-floor suite with a king bed and a view, but the luxury felt hollow. He kept seeing Melissa's face, the way pain and anger had warred in her eyes when he'd asked about Harper. "You said you'd never love a woman like me." Those words, his words, thrown back at him, cut deeper than any business rival's betrayal ever had. He remembered saying them, remembered the moment with crystalline clarity, because it was the moment he'd proven to himself that he was exactly like his father, a man who chose ambition over love, who ran when things got real, who measured success in dollars instead of in the people who actually mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. "Board meeting rescheduled to Monday. Singapore investors want to move timeline up. Need you back by Sunday." Brandon stared at the message, then set the phone face down on the nightstand. For the first time in his professional life, work felt irrelevant. He pulled out his laptop and opened Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, any social media platform where he might find more information about Melissa and Harper. Melissa's Instagram was private, but her Facebook had some public posts. Photos from local parks, Portland's Saturday Market, the Oregon coast. Always the same two people, mother and daughter, smiling, hiking, eating ice cream, carving pumpkins, happy. They looked so happy. There were a few other people who appeared regularly. An older black woman, probably Melissa's mother, who he vaguely remembered her mentioning. A younger woman with similar features, likely her sister. A couple of kids around Harper's age, probably friends from school. But no man, no father figure stepping into the void he'd left. Brandon clicked on a photo from Harper's 6th birthday party 4 months ago. She was standing in front of a unicorn cake, wearing a silver crown, surrounded by a dozen screaming children. Melissa was in the background, phone in hand, capturing the moment her daughter blew out the candles. The caption read, "My brave, brilliant, beautiful girl is 6 today. Every day with you is a gift, Harper. Thank you for making me a mom." His vision blurred. He closed the laptop and buried his face in his hands. What kind of father finds out about his daughter through social media? What kind of man needs 7 years and a random LinkedIn post to realize what he'd walked away from? The next morning, Brandon woke at dawn to his phone ringing. His sister, Rachel. "Marcus called me," she said without preamble. "He said you're in Portland. He said you found Melissa. Brandon, what the hell is going on?" He told her everything. The photo, Harper, the confrontation in the rain. When he finished, Rachel was quiet for so long he thought the call had dropped. "Rach, I'm here. I'm just processing. You have a daughter. I have a niece." Her voice cracked. "Why didn't Melissa tell you?" "Because I told her I'd never love her. Because I made it clear I didn't want that kind of life." "Why would she tell me?" "Because it's your child, Brandon. She had a right to—" Rachel stopped herself. "No, actually I get it. After what you said to her, I probably wouldn't have told you either. God, you really fucked up." "I know. So what are you going to do?" Brandon looked out at the gray Portland morning, fog rolling off the river. "I don't know. She doesn't want me anywhere near Harper, and I can't blame her." "But you're not leaving." It wasn't a question. Rachel knew him better than anyone. "No, I'm not leaving." "Then you need a plan, better than showing up in the rain like some rom-com protagonist. Melissa's not going to forgive you because you look sad and desperate. You need to prove you've changed, that you're serious about this." "How?" Rachel sighed. "I have no idea, but figure it out, little brother, because if you screw this up again, I'll fly to Portland myself and kick your ass." After they hung up, Brandon sat on the edge of the hotel bed, staring at his reflection in the mirror across the room. He looked like hell, unshaven, exhausted, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled shirt. When was the last time he'd looked this disheveled? He ran Cole Development like a military operation. He controlled every variable, every outcome. He didn't do chaos, but love was chaos. Fatherhood was chaos, and maybe that was why he'd run from it in the first place. His phone buzzed again, this time an unknown Portland number. His heart leapt into his throat as he answered. "Hello, Mr. Cole?" A woman's voice, professional but warm, not Melissa. "This is Diana Richardson, Melissa's mother. I think we need to talk." Brandon's hand tightened around the phone. Yes, absolutely. When and where?" "There's a coffee shop called Courier Coffee in downtown Portland. Can you be there in an hour?" "I'll be there." Diana Richardson was waiting for him at a corner table when he arrived. a half-empty cup of something that smelled like cinnamon in front of her. She was in her early 60s, with silver-streaked hair in locks and Melissa's same warm brown eyes, though hers were currently assessing him with the protective scrutiny of a mother bear evaluating a potential threat to her cub. "Mrs. Richardson," Brandon said, extending his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." She shook his hand briefly, then gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit, and it's Diana. Mrs. Richardson was my mother-in-law. God rest her soul." Brandon sat, suddenly feeling like he was 16 again, meeting a girlfriend's parents for the first time, except he'd never actually done that. He'd avoided that level of commitment his entire life. Diana studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Melissa doesn't know I'm here. If she did, she'd probably lock herself and Harper in the house for a month. But I'm here because I watched my daughter cry herself to sleep for 6 months after you broke her heart. I held her hair back when morning sickness made her so sick she couldn't work. I was in that delivery room when she brought Harper into the world, terrified and alone except for me and her sister." Each sentence landed like a punch. Brandon's throat tightened. "Diana, She held up a hand. "I'm not finished. I watched Melissa build a life for herself and that little girl from nothing. She waitressed at night while finishing her degree. She took every freelance design job she could find. She moved to Portland for a better job opportunity and a fresh start. She has never, not once, asked anyone for help she didn't desperately need. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That she's strong, that she survived without me." "No," Diana said sharply. "That she shouldn't have had to. That girl loved you, Brandon, really loved you, and you crushed her like she was disposable." She leaned forward, her gaze intense. "So here's my question. What's different now? Why should I believe you're not going to do the same thing to Harper that you did to her mother?" Brandon had prepared for this. He'd rehearsed answers in the mirror, practiced what he'd say if given the chance. But sitting across from this woman who'd witnessed all the pain he'd caused, all his carefully prepared words evaporated. "I don't know if anything's different," he admitted. "I'm still the same guy who's been running from real connection his whole life. I'm still the guy who measures his worth in quarterly earnings and real estate portfolios. But the moment I saw Harper's face, something broke open in me. Or maybe it woke up. I don't know." He met Diana's eyes. "All I know is that I have a daughter who doesn't know I exist, and the idea of spending the rest of my life wondering who she is, what she loves, what makes her laugh, it's unbearable. Not because of ego or obligation, but because she's part of me, and I want to be part of her life if Melissa will let me, if you'll help me convince her." Diana was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, "Harper asked about her father for the first time 6 months ago. She was watching a movie where the dad came to the daughter's school play, and she turned to Melissa and said, 'Why don't I have a daddy?' Do you know what Melissa told her?" Brandon shook his head, his chest tight. "She said, 'You have me, baby, and that's enough.' And Harper said, 'Okay, Mommy,' just like that. Because my granddaughter trusts her mother completely." Diana's voice softened slightly. "But I saw Melissa's face after Harper went to bed that night. I saw how much it killed her to not be able to give her daughter that one thing every kid wants, 2 parents who love them. So you think I should—" "I think," Diana interrupted, "that you need to prove yourself before you get anywhere near that little girl. Melissa's built a fortress around Harper to protect her from being hurt the way she was hurt. You want in, you earn it. You show up, you do the work. You prove you're not going to disappear the moment things get hard or inconvenient. How do I do that?" Diana pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was information for a family law attorney in Portland. "First, you establish paternity legally. Then you go through the proper channels: court-ordered DNA test, mediation, custody arrangements. You do this right, by the book, so Melissa knows you're serious, that this isn't some emotional impulse you'll regret in 6 months." Brandon stared at the attorney's information, his heart sinking. "That could take months, maybe longer." "Yes, it will. Which brings me to my second point." Diana's expression softened slightly, just a fraction. "Melissa works at a design firm downtown, Wildwood Creative. Her office is 3 blocks from here. She gets lunch every Tuesday and Thursday at a Vietnamese place called Luc Lac. She sits at the counter, usually alone, and works on her tablet while she eats. I'm not telling you to ambush her. I'm telling you that if you want to prove you're serious, you need to be present in Portland, not flying back to San Francisco to run your company from a distance. Harper has a school Thanksgiving program next week, public event. Melissa will be there. So will I." Brandon understood what she was offering: opportunities, chances to show up, to be present, to prove he wasn't going to disappear again. "Thank you." he said quietly. Diana, thank you. She stood, gathering her coat and purse. Don't thank me yet. You hurt my daughter again, and I don't care how much money you have or how many buildings you own. I will end you. Are we clear? Crystal clear. After Diana left, Brandon sat in the coffee shop for another 20 minutes, staring at the attorney's information on his phone. This was real. This was happening. He was about to potentially start a legal battle with the mother of his child to establish his right to be a father. But wasn't that exactly what he deserved? To have to fight for what he'd thrown away? He called the attorney and scheduled a consultation for that afternoon. Then he called his assistant and told her to clear his calendar for the next month. She sputtered protests about board meetings and Singapore investors and the Miami development deal. But Brandon cut her off. Reschedule everything. Delegate what you can. I'm staying in Portland, and this is non-negotiable. For the first time since building coal development, his company wasn't his priority. His daughter was. That Thursday, Brandon sat in his rented Tesla across from Luke Lack, watching the lunch crowd come and go. He'd almost talked himself out of this a dozen times. Diana had given him intel, but that didn't mean he should use it. Showing up at Melissa's lunch spot felt dangerously close to stalking, but he wasn't here to corner her or force a conversation. He was here to be visible, to show her he was still in Portland, still trying, still refusing to disappear like he had 7 years ago. At 12:30, Melissa walked into the restaurant. She wore a burgundy blazer over a black turtleneck, her hair in a professional bun, laptop bag slung over her shoulder. She looked like she'd stepped out of a design magazine. Effortlessly elegant, confident, successful. Brandon felt a surge of pride that caught him off guard. Look what she'd built. Look who she'd become, despite him. He waited 5 minutes, then followed her inside. The restaurant was busy, the scent of lemongrass and cilantro thick in the air. Melissa sat at the counter near the window, just like Diana had said, her tablet already open beside her faux bowl. She was absorbed in whatever she was working on, a slight crease between her eyebrows that Brandon recognized as her concentration face. He approached slowly, his heart hammering. Melissa, her head snapped up, eyes widening when she saw him. For a second he thought she might bolt, but instead, her expression hardened into something between resignation and fury. Are you following me now? No, yes, sort of. He held up his hands. Your mom told me you eat here. I'm not trying to ambush you. I wanted you to know I'm still here, that I'm not leaving. My mother? Melissa's voice rose slightly. My mother told you where I eat lunch. Several other diners glanced their way. Melissa closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then gathered her things. She brushed past Brandon toward the exit and he followed her out onto the sidewalk. Melissa, please. I can't believe her, Melissa said more to herself than to him. She promised she'd stay out of this. She promised. She spun to face him, eyes blazing. What did you say to her? What did you do? Nothing. She called me. She wanted to make sure I was serious about wanting to be in Harper's life. And you convinced her. How? With your money, your charm. The same charm you used on me before you decided I wasn't worth loving. The pain in her voice stopped him cold. They stood on the busy downtown sidewalk, people flowing around them like water around stones. And Brandon realized with stunning clarity that he'd been thinking about this all wrong. He'd been so focused on Harper, on his right to know his daughter, that he'd forgotten the most important thing. Before he could be Harper's father, he needed to reckon with how he'd destroyed Harper's mother. You were worth loving, he said quietly. You are worth loving. I was the one who wasn't worthy of you. Melissa's eyes glistened, but she blinked rapidly, refusing to let tears fall. Don't do that. Don't try to rewrite history with pretty words. I'm not. I'm telling you the truth. I was too much of a coward to admit 7 years ago. Brandon stepped closer, his voice rough with emotion. I was terrified of you, Melissa. Terrified of how much I felt. My father spent my entire childhood choosing work over family. He missed every birthday, every baseball game, every moment that mattered. When he finally retired, he realized he had a fortune and no one who cared if he lived or died. I watched that and promised myself I'd never let anyone get close enough to disappoint them the way he disappointed us. So you pushed me away first. Yeah, I pushed you away first, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. Melissa shook her head slowly. You can't just show up and expect everything to be okay because you've had some kind of epiphany. 7 years, Brandon. 7 years of silence. 7 years of Harper asking questions I couldn't answer. 7 years of me building a life that doesn't have room for you in it. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but Harper deserves a father who'll show up for her, who'll fight to be in her life. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to let me prove myself. How? By following me to lunch? By showing up at my house? By doing whatever it takes? I've already contacted a family attorney. I want to establish paternity legally, go through mediation, set up a custody arrangement. Whatever you need to feel secure. I'm not trying to take her from you, Melissa. I just want to be part of her life. Melissa stared at him, something shifting in her expression. You hired an attorney? I meet with her next week. I want to do this right, by the book, so you know this isn't some impulsive decision I'll regret later. For the first time since he'd reappeared in her life, Melissa looked uncertain rather than angry. She hugged her laptop bag to her chest, a defensive gesture that made her look younger, more vulnerable. I need time to think, she finally said. I need to talk to my own lawyer, figure out what's best for Harper. Of course, take all the time you need. And you can't just show up at my house or my work anymore. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly, through attorneys, with boundaries. Brandon nodded, even though the thought of more delays, more distance, made him want to scream. Whatever you need. Melissa turned to leave, then hesitated. Why now? Why do you suddenly care about being a father? It was the question he'd been asking himself since the moment he saw Harper's photo. And finally, standing on a Portland sidewalk with November rain starting to fall again, he had an answer. Because I looked at her face and realized I've been dead inside for 7 years. And maybe if I can be the father she deserves, I might figure out how to be alive again. Melissa's expression cracked just for a second, revealing the hurt still raw beneath her armor. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing into the lunch crowd, leaving Brandon standing in the rain. But this time, he knew where she was. He knew where Harper was, and he wasn't going anywhere. The attorney, Samantha Park, had an office in the Pearl District with exposed brick walls and a view of Powell's City of Books. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no nonsense, and she didn't sugarcoat the situation when Brandon laid it all out. You're at a significant disadvantage, she said, leaning back in her leather chair. You've had no contact with this child for 6 years. You made no attempt to establish paternity. The mother has been the sole provider and caregiver. Any family court judge is going to look at this case and see a father who abandoned his responsibilities. I didn't know, Brandon protested. If I'd known, it doesn't matter. Oregon family law prioritizes the best interests of the child. What's best for Harper is stability, consistency, and minimal disruption to her established life. You showing up now, no matter how remorseful you are, represents a massive disruption. Brandon's hands clenched on the arms of his chair. So what do? You establish paternity first. That's non-negotiable. Then you request mediation with Ms. Richardson. If she's willing to work with you outside of court, that's your best option. Judges prefer parents who can cooperate. If mediation fails, you petition for custody and visitation rights. But understand, you'll likely start with supervised visits, maybe 1 hour a week, building up to unsupervised time, overnight visits, shared custody. That's a years-long process, assuming Miss Richardson agrees to any of it. Years. The word hit him like a physical blow. And if she refuses, if she fights me on this? Samantha's expression softened slightly. Then it gets ugly, expensive, and traumatic for everyone involved, especially Harper. My advice? Don't let it get there. Show Miss Richardson you're serious about being a parent, not just asserting your rights. Attend parenting classes. Get therapy to address whatever made you push people away in the first place. Build a life in Portland that demonstrates you're committed to being present. Make yourself into someone she can trust to be around her daughter. Brandon left the meeting feeling simultaneously determined and overwhelmed. Everything Samantha said made sense, but the timeline, months or years before he could be a real presence in Harper's life, felt excruciating. But he'd done this to himself. He'd created this situation. If it took years to fix it, then that's what he'd do. He spent the next week setting up a temporary life in Portland. He found a furnished apartment in the Pearl District, walking distance from Melissa's office. He registered for a parenting class at a local community center, feeling ridiculous and out of place among the expecting couples and young parents. He scheduled an appointment with a therapist who specialized in commitment issues and family dynamics, and he started learning everything he could about Harper through careful Facebook stalking and conversations with Diana, who'd become an unlikely ally after their coffee shop meeting. He learned that Harper loved purple unicorns and chapter books. She was in first grade at a school in the Selwood neighborhood. She took swimming lessons on Saturday mornings and had recently lost her first tooth. She was obsessed with a show called Bluey and could recite entire episodes from memory. Diana sent him photos sometimes. Harper at the Oregon Zoo, Harper playing at a playground, Harper with chocolate smeared on her face after a birthday party. Each photo felt like a gift and a knife wound simultaneously. His daughter, his beautiful, perfect daughter, who had no idea he existed. The Thursday before Thanksgiving, Brandon drove to Harper's school for the holiday program. Diana had texted him the details with a warning. Stay in the back. Don't approach Melissa or Harper. Just watch. Just be present. The elementary school gym was packed with parents and grandparents, everyone wielding phones and cameras. Brandon found a spot in the back corner, his heart racing. The first grade class filed onto the makeshift stage. 24 6-year-olds in construction paper Native American headdresses and pilgrim hats, and there she was. Harper stood in the second row, wearing a paper bonnet with white trim, her smile showing the gap where her tooth had been. She scanned the crowd, found someone, Melissa, Brandon realized, standing about 20 feet from where he was, and waved enthusiastically. For the next 30 minutes, Brandon watched his daughter sing songs about thankfulness and turkeys. Her voice enthusiastic, if not entirely on key. She had Melissa's expressiveness, throwing herself fully into every gesture and lyric. She had his stubbornness too, he realized, when she visibly disagreed with something another kid said and crossed her arms in a pose he'd seen in his own childhood photos. When the program ended and kids rushed off the stage to find their parents, Brandon watched Melissa scoop Harper into a hug, spinning her around while Harper giggled. The love between them was so palpable it hurt to witness. They had this whole life, this whole rhythm and routine, and he was a ghost at the edges of it. But he was here, he was present, and that had to count for something. As families began filtering out of the gym, Brandon turned to leave and nearly collided with Melissa. She'd been walking toward the exit with Harper, and now they stood face to face, close enough that he could see the surprise flash across Melissa's features before she schooled them into neutrality. Harper looked up at him with curious eyes. "Mommy, who's that?" Brandon's breath caught. This was it, the moment he'd been simultaneously dreading and desperately wanting. What did Melissa tell her? How did she explain who he was? Melissa's hand tightened on Harper's shoulder. "He's an old friend, baby. Come on, Grandma's waiting for us." She steered Harper around him and toward the door, but Harper glanced back, studying Brandon with the intensity only a 6-year-old could muster. "You have eyes like mine," she said matter-of-factly. "They're brown but also kind of yellow." "Harper, come on," Melissa said, her voice strained. But Harper had already pulled free and was standing directly in front of Brandon, peering up at him with the same analytical expression he'd seen on his sister when she was solving a puzzle. "Are you somebody important?" Brandon crouched down to her eye level, his throat tight with emotion. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. This was his child, his daughter, real and solid and looking at him with expectant curiosity. "I hope so," he said carefully. "I hope I can be." "Brandon," Melissa's voice was sharp with warning. He stood immediately, holding up his hands. "I'm sorry. I was just leaving." But Harper was already tugging on Melissa's sleeve. "Mommy, why does that man have eyes like mine? Does that mean we're related?" Melissa's face had gone pale. "Harper, not now. We'll talk about it later." "But later." Brandon watched them leave, his heart in his throat. Harper looked back twice before Melissa guided her out of the gym, her little face scrunched in confusion. He'd just met his daughter, and she'd noticed their connection immediately. Outside, rain was falling again, turning the afternoon gray and cold. Brandon sat in his car for 10 minutes, hands shaking, before his phone rang. "Melissa, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "Harper won't stop asking questions. She's too smart. She knows something's going on." "Okay, when and where?" "Tomorrow, Diana's house, 7 p.m. And Brandon?" Her voice cracked slightly. "If we're going to tell her, we need to figure out how, together. Because I won't let you hurt her the way you hurt me. I won't. I swear to God, Melissa, I won't." The line went dead. Brandon sat in the school parking lot, watching parents load their kids into cars, the normalcy of it all highlighting how abnormal his situation was. Tomorrow night, he might tell his daughter who he was. Tomorrow night, everything could change, or everything could fall apart. He started the car and drove back to his empty apartment, the weight of 7 years of mistakes pressing down on his shoulders. But for the first time since this all began, he felt something besides guilt and regret. He felt hope. Diana Richardson's house was a modest craftsman in the Woodstock neighborhood, with a front porch cluttered with potted plants and a wreath on the door. Brandon stood on the sidewalk Friday evening, willing his hands to stop shaking. Inside that house was Melissa and possibly Harper, and the conversation that could determine the rest of his life. He'd spent the entire day preparing. He'd written down everything he wanted to say, then thrown it away because it sounded too rehearsed. He'd called Rachel, who'd given him the same advice their mother used to give before difficult conversations. "Just tell the truth, little brother. That's all you can do." The door opened before he could knock. Diana stood there, assessing him with the same protective intensity as their first meeting. "You're on time. That's a start. Come in." The house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Family photos covered every wall. Diana's late husband, Melissa as a child, Melissa's sister, and dozens of Harper at various ages. Brandon found himself stopping in front of a photo of Harper as a newborn, wrapped in a pink blanket, her tiny face scrunched and red. "That was taken the day she was born," Diana said quietly behind him. 3:30 in the morning after 14 hours of labor. Melissa held her and cried for an hour straight. Happy tears, terrified tears, every kind of tears. Then she looked at me and said, "I'm going to give this little girl everything." And she has. Brandon swallowed hard. "Where is she? Where are they?" "Melissa's in the living room. Harper's at her aunt's house for the night. We thought it was better to talk without her here first. Figure out a plan." Relief and disappointment warred in his chest. He wanted to see Harper again, but Diana was right. They needed to talk first. Melissa sat on a worn leather couch, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, her expression guarded but less hostile than previous encounters. She'd changed from her work clothes into jeans and a Portland Thorn sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked younger, more like the woman he'd known 7 years ago, and it made his chest ache with memory. "Sit," Diana instructed, pointing to an armchair across from the couch. "I'm going to make myself scarce, but I'm also right upstairs if anyone needs me. Play nice, both of you. This isn't about your feelings, it's about that little girl." After Diana left, silence stretched between them. Brandon didn't know where to start. There was so much to say, so much to apologize for, that it all jammed up in his throat. Melissa spoke first. "Harper asked me 16 times last night who you were. She said your eyes looked like hers. She said you seemed sad. She wanted to know why I called you an old friend when I've never mentioned you before." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, sort of." Melissa set down her tea, her hands trembling slightly. "I told her that sometimes adults know each other before kids are born, and sometimes those adults don't stay friends. But that doesn't mean they're bad people. She asked if you were someone from before she was born. I said yes." Brandon leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Does she know? Does she suspect?" "She's 6, Brandon. She doesn't understand yet, but she will. Soon. She's already asking why she doesn't have a dad when all her friends do. She's already starting to notice that her family looks different." Melissa's voice cracked. "And I don't know how to tell her the truth without making you the villain or making myself look like I kept her from you. You're not the villain in this, I am." But she won't understand that. She'll just hear your dad didn't want you, and that will destroy her. "Then we don't tell her that," Brandon said firmly. "We tell her I didn't know about her, that if I had known I would have been there from the beginning. It's the truth, Melissa. I would have." "Would you?" Melissa's eyes flashed with old pain. "Would you really? Or would you have convinced me to get an abortion because a baby didn't fit into your 5-year plan? Would you have resented me for trapping you? I've spent 7 years wondering how that conversation would have gone if I'd told you. And honestly, I don't think it would have ended with you stepping up." The accusation hung in the air between them, brutal and possibly true. Brandon forced himself to really think about who he'd been 7 years ago. The 31-year-old workaholic who'd measured his worth in deal closures and board positions, who'd never been in a relationship longer than 8 months, who'd told himself he was too damaged to be anyone's husband or father. "You're probably right," he admitted quietly. "The Brandon you knew 7 years ago would have run. He would have offered to pay for whatever you decided and then disappeared. But Melissa, I'm not asking you to trust who I was. I'm asking you to give me a chance to show you who I'm trying to become. Why should I? Why should I believe you've changed? Because I've spent the last 2 weeks in Portland instead of running my company. Because I've hired a family attorney and registered for parenting classes. Because I wake up every morning thinking about Harper and go to sleep every night wondering what I missed in her life. Because," his voice broke, "because I looked at her face at that school program and something fundamental shifted in me. I felt what I should have felt with you 7 years ago, that there's nothing more important than this, than her, than being the person she deserves." Tears spilled down Melissa's cheeks. She swiped at them angrily. "You can't just say pretty words and expect me to forget what you did. How much you hurt me." "I know. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to consider what's best for Harper. Does she deserve a chance to know her father? If he's genuinely willing to do the work to be a good one. Melissa was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I loved you so much. Did you know that? I was going to tell you the night you ended things. I was going to tell you I loved you, that I wanted a future with you. And instead, you told me you'd never love a woman like me. The confession shattered something in Brandon's chest. Melissa, I found out I was pregnant 3 weeks later. I was still grieving, still trying to figure out how to exist in a world where you didn't want me. And then I saw those 2 lines on the test. She laughed bitterly. I stood in my bathroom for an hour just staring at it. And you know what my first thought was? That I wanted to call you. That even after everything, you were still the first person I wanted to tell. Why didn't you? Because you'd made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me, with the life I represented. How was I supposed to call and say, hey, remember that future you said you didn't want? Surprise, it's happening anyway. Melissa met his eyes. Hers red-rimmed but steady. I made a choice, Brandon. I chose to protect myself and my baby from the possibility that you'd reject us both. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe I should have told you. But I was 26, pregnant, alone, and terrified. I made the best decision I could with the information I had. Brandon wanted to argue that she should have told him, that he had a right to know. But sitting here, seeing the pain still fresh in her eyes 7 years later, he couldn't deny the truth. She'd been protecting herself from him, and he'd given her every reason to do so. I'm sorry, he said. The words inadequate, but sincere. I'm sorry for all of it. For hurting you. For making you feel like you couldn't tell me. For missing 6 years of Harper's life. For not being the man you deserved back then. I can't undo any of it, but I can try to do better now. Melissa closed her eyes, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm so tired, Brandon. I'm so tired of being strong all the time, of being mom and dad, of having to have all the answers. And now you're here, offering to share that burden. And I don't know if I can trust it. I don't know if I can trust you. Then don't. Not yet. Brandon leaned forward, his voice urgent. Let me earn it. Let me prove myself day by day, choice by choice. Give me supervised visits. Give me an hour a week. Whatever you need to feel safe. But please, Melissa, please give me a chance. She opened her eyes, studying him for a long, searching moment. Finally, she said, if we do this, there are rules, non-negotiable rules. Anything. 1, you don't tell Harper you're her father until I'm ready, until we're both ready, and we've talked to a child psychologist about the best way to do it. Agreed. 2, visits are supervised by me or my mom until I feel comfortable with unsupervised time. No taking her places without my explicit permission, of course. 3, if you hurt her, if you promise to be in her life and then disappear, I will make sure you never see her again, legal rights or not. I don't care what any court says. I will protect my daughter from you. The threat was delivered calmly, but Brandon heard the steel underneath. Melissa wasn't the soft-hearted 26-year-old he'd left behind. She was a mother, and mothers were fierce. I won't hurt her. I swear on everything I have, Melissa, I won't disappear. She studied him for another moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, we'll try. But Brandon, if this goes wrong, it won't, I promise. Diana appeared in the doorway, 2 cups of tea in hand. I'm guessing you two figured something out since no one's yelling? Melissa accepted the tea with a watery smile. We're going to try. Supervised visits. Slowly, Diana looked at Brandon, her expression still protective but slightly warmer. You hurt either of them and I'll hunt you down myself. Clear? Crystal? Good. Then let's figure out logistics. When do you want to start? They spent the next 2 hours planning. Brandon would come to Diana's house every Sunday afternoon for 2 hours. Harper would be told he was a friend of the family who wanted to get to know her. They'd do activities, coloring, board games, trips to nearby parks, always with Melissa or Diana present. If things went well, they'd gradually increase the time and eventually tell Harper the truth. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the instant connection Brandon had fantasized about, but it was something. It was a beginning. As Brandon prepared to leave, Melissa walked him to the door. They stood on the porch, the November cold biting through their clothes, and for a moment, They were just two people who'd once meant everything to each other, navigating the wreckage they'd created. "Thank you," Brandon said quietly, "for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it." "You don't," Melissa agreed, "but Harper does. She deserves a father who shows up, so prove to me that's who you are." She went inside and closed the door, leaving Brandon standing in the cold darkness. But this time, the door closing didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something he thought he'd lost forever. A chance to be the man Harper needed him to be. A chance to finally do something right. Sunday arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of November day where Portland's gray reputation seemed like a myth and the sky stretched blue and endless. Brandon woke at 6 a.m. Despite not needing to be at Diana's house until 2 p.m., his stomach twisted with nerves. Today he'd spend real time with Harper. Today he'd start building a relationship with his daughter. He'd spent Saturday shopping for gifts, then second-guessing himself and returning half of them. Too much too soon, Melissa had warned via text. Don't try to buy her affection. So he'd settled on a single children's book, Where the Wild Things Are, a story about belonging and home that felt appropriate in ways he couldn't quite articulate. Diana's house looked different in daylight, the paint slightly worn but the garden lovingly tended. Brandon sat in his car for 5 minutes, practicing his breathing like the therapist had taught him. "You're not trying to be the perfect father. You're just trying to be present. That's enough for today." Melissa answered the door. She clearly dressed carefully for this. Jeans and a soft blue sweater that brought out the warmth in her skin, her hair in a simple ponytail. Professional but approachable. She was putting on armor too, Brandon realized. This was just as terrifying for her as it was for him. "You're early," she said. "Sorry, I can wait in the car." "No, it's fine. Come in. Harper's in the living room with my mom. She thinks you're a friend who's coming to hang out. Diana told her you work with computers and travel a lot, so you don't get much time to meet new friends. That okay?" The lie sat uncomfortably, but Brandon understood its necessity. Whatever makes her comfortable. They walked into the living room where Harper sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by what appeared to be every art supply known to humanity. She was deep in concentration, coloring what looked like an elaborate castle scene, her tongue poking out slightly in focus. Diana sat nearby, knitting something purple. "Harper, honey," Melissa said gently. "This is Brandon. He's the friend Grandma told you about." Harper looked up, and Brandon's heart stuttered. In natural light, she was even more beautiful. Her skin the perfect blend of his and Melissa's tones. Her hair in 2 puffs today, with sparkly purple clips. Her smile curious and open. She studied him with the same intense focus she'd been applying to her coloring. "Hi," she said. "Do you like coloring?" It was such a simple question, so purely childlike, that Brandon felt his practiced introduction evaporate. Yeah, I used to, when I was a kid." "Good, you can help me. I'm making a princess castle, but I need someone to color the dragon. Dragons are hard." Just like that, Brandon found himself sitting cross-legged on Diana Richardson's floor, coloring a dragon in a 6-year-old's masterpiece. Harper narrated her creative vision with the confidence of a museum curator. This tower was for the princess who invented flying machines. That courtyard was for the horses who could talk. The dragon, the one Brandon was currently coloring, was actually good and only looked scary to protect the castle from real bad guys. "Why red?" Harper asked, peering at his crayon choice. "Because red is powerful. It stands out." She considered this seriously. "Okay, but give him purple wings." "Purple is the best color. Purple wings." "Got it." Melissa and Diana watched from the couch, and Brandon could feel their scrutiny, their protective assessment of every word he said. But Harper seemed completely at ease, chattering about her week at school. They were learning addition, which she thought was kind of boring, but also kind of fun. Her best friend Emma, who had a pool and had invited Harper for a summer play date. And the loose tooth that was super wiggly and would probably come out soon. "When you lose a tooth, the tooth fairy gives you money," Harper explained solemnly. "I already have $3 for my other teeth." "Mommy says I can save it for something special." "What do you want to buy?" Brandon asked, carefully coloring within the lines of the dragon's wing. Harper's face lit up. "A real easel, like for painting. Emma has one and she lets me use it sometimes, but Mommy says they're expensive, so I'm saving." Brandon glanced at Melissa, who gave him a warning look that clearly said, "Don't you dare offer to buy her an easel." He focused back on the dragon, swallowing the instinct to solve this problem with money. After coloring, Harper declared it was snack time. She led Brandon to the kitchen with the authority of someone giving a tour of a palace, explaining Diana's house rules. Shoes off at the door, quiet voices during nap time, even though Harper didn't nap anymore because she was too big, and everyone had to help clean up after activities. They made ants on a log, celery with peanut butter and raisins, and Harper carefully counted out exactly the same number of raisins for each piece, her small fingers precise and determined. She narrated the entire process, explaining that Grandma had taught her this recipe and that ants on a log was actually a silly name because ants couldn't really carry logs, and also these weren't real ants. "Do you like to cook?" Harper asked, arranging the snacks on a plate. "Not really. I mostly order food." Her eyes widened. "Every day?" "Yeah, pretty much." "That's weird. Mommy says cooking is important. She says it's how you take care of yourself and people you love." Harper said this with the certainty of gospel truth, and Brandon realized how many of Melissa's values were already embedded in their daughter. Melissa had been her only parent, her primary teacher, the architect of her worldview. Harper was Melissa's daughter in every way that mattered, but she had his eyes, his stubborn chin, his intensity when she focused on a task. She was his too, whether he'd earned that or not. They ate their snacks in the living room, Harper sitting between Brandon and Diana on the couch, swinging her legs and asking Brandon 100 questions. Where did he live? San Francisco, but he was staying in Portland for a while. Did he have any pets? No, but he used to have a dog named Rocket when he was her age. What was his favorite color? He'd never really thought about it, but Harper informed him that was weird, and everyone should have a favorite color, so he settled on blue. Did he like school when he was little? Not as much as he should have. "I like school mostly," Harper said, "except for when Carter pushes people. He pushed Emma last week and she cried, and I told Mrs. Patterson and Carter got a timeout." "That was brave," Brandon said, "standing up for your friend." Harper beamed. "Mommy says brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." More Melissa wisdom, shaping this little girl into someone kind and courageous. Brandon glanced at Melissa, who was watching their interaction with an expression he couldn't quite read. Hope? Fear? Maybe both. The 2 hours flew by. They played a board game called Candyland that Harper dominated with gleeful competitiveness. They read a chapter from Charlotte's Web. Harper curled against Diana on the couch while Brandon sat nearby, listening to Diana's gentle narration. They looked at photo albums, Harper narrating her own life. "That's me when I was a baby. Mommy says I cried a lot. That's me at the beach. That's me on my first day of school. That's me and Grandma at the zoo." Every photo was a moment Brandon had missed, a memory he wasn't part of. But Harper was inviting him into her world now, sharing her history with the unself-conscious openness of a child who didn't yet understand what she was offering. When Melissa said it was time for Brandon to leave, Harper's face fell. "Already? But we didn't finish coloring the castle." "Brandon will come back next week," Melissa said gently. "You can finish it then. Promise?" Harper looked at Brandon with those amber brown eyes. His eyes, and the weight of that question crashed over him. This little girl, his daughter, was already starting to trust him, and if he broke that trust, it would confirm every fear Melissa had about him. "I promise," he said. "Next Sunday, same time." "Okay." Harper brightened immediately, her mood shifting with the fluidity of childhood. "Bye, Brandon. Don't forget about the dragon wings." At the door, Melissa walked him out while Harper was distracted helping Diana clean up the crayons. They stood on the porch in the cooling afternoon, the sun already beginning its descent toward the coast range. "You did well," Melissa said quietly. "She liked you." "She's incredible, Melissa. She's smart and funny and kind. You did that. You raised someone extraordinary." Melissa's expression softened. "She's pretty great, isn't she?" "The best." Brandon hesitated, then asked, "Did it feel wrong, me being here?" "Honestly? Yes, no, I don't know." Melissa wrapped her arms around herself. "It felt surreal, watching you two together, seeing how much she looks like you. But also, she was happy, and I haven't seen her that excited about hanging out with an adult in a while. She's usually more reserved with new people. She trusted me because you trusted me enough to let me be here. I'm still not sure I do trust you," Melissa admitted, "but I'm trying, for her sake. That's all I can ask." Brandon drove back to his apartment as the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of purple Harper would have loved. He felt simultaneously elated and heartbroken. Elated because he'd spent 2 hours with his daughter, and it had been magical. Heartbroken because he'd already missed 6 years of moments like this, and he could never get them back. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. How did it go? Brandon pulled over and called her instead of texting. When she answered, he could hear the hope in her voice. Tell me everything, she demanded. So he did. He described Harper's intensity with art, her rules following nature, her concern for her friend Emma, her trust, despite knowing him for less than 3 hours. He described how it felt to realize Melissa had raised their daughter to be brave and kind. He described the ache of seeing 6 years of memories in photo albums that he wasn't part of. But you're part of her life now, Rachel said when he finished. That's what matters. Moving forward. I don't want to screw this up, Rach. Then don't. Show up every week. Be consistent. Be present. You're good at committing to things when you decide they matter, Brandon. You built a company from nothing. You can do this. After they hung up, Brandon sat in his parked car and thought about what Rachel said. You're good at committing to things when you decide they matter. For 7 years, he'd committed to coal development with single-minded intensity. He'd sacrificed relationships, free time, his own mental health for quarterly earnings and development deals. Harper mattered more than all of it. Melissa mattered more than all of it. So maybe it was time to commit to them the way he'd committed to his company. Completely, without reservation, without running when things got hard. The next Sunday, Brandon brought art supplies, high-quality colored pencils and thick drawing paper. Not because he was trying to buy Harper's affection, but because he'd listened when she talked about loving art. Melissa had approved the gift via text. That's thoughtful. Thank you. Harper's face lit up when she saw the supplies. These are the good ones. Emma has these. Can we draw together? They spent the afternoon drawing. Harper made elaborate scenes of castles and dragons and princesses who saved themselves. Brandon, whose artistic skills had atrophied somewhere around age 12, drew stick figures that made Harper giggle. You're not very good at drawing, she observed with a child's brutal honesty. No, I'm really not. That's okay. Everybody's good at different things. What are you good at? It was such a simple question, but it gutted him. What was he good at? Making money? Closing deals? Pushing people away when they got too close? How did he explain that to a 6-year-old? I'm good at solving problems, he finally said. When something's broken or complicated, I figure out how to fix it. Harper considered this seriously. Like a detective? Kind of, yeah. Cool. She went back to her drawing, adding purple details to a princess's dress. Mommy's good at making beautiful things. Grandma's good at baking. I'm going to be good at drawing and maybe also science. Her casual confidence, her certainty about her future self, made Brandon's chest tight. This little girl had no idea how much he'd already missed, how much ground he had to make up. She just saw him as Brandon, her mom's friend, someone who showed up on Sundays and tried his best at drawing dragons. That evening, after he'd left Diana's house, Melissa called him. It was late, almost 10 p.m., and her voice sounded tired. Harper's asleep, she said. But she talked about you for an hour before bed. She wanted to know when you were coming back, if you'd teach her to solve problems like a detective, if you liked her drawings. Brandon's throat tightened. What did you tell her? I told her you liked her very much, that you thought she was smart and creative, that you'd definitely come back next Sunday. Melissa paused. Brandon, she's getting attached. I can see it happening, and it terrifies me. I won't hurt her, Melissa, I swear. You can't know that. People don't mean to hurt the ones they love, but they do it anyway. You did it to me. I know, and I'm sorry, but I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. Prove it, Melissa said, her voice breaking. Keep proving it, every single day, because if you disappoint her, if you break her heart the way you broke mine, I'll never forgive you, and she might never forgive you either. After the call ended, Brandon stood at his apartment window, looking out at Portland's lights scattered across the dark city. Somewhere out there, Harper was sleeping in a bed covered with purple blankets, dreaming whatever 6-year-olds dreamed. Somewhere out there, Melissa was lying awake, terrified that letting him into their lives was the worst mistake she'd ever make. He had to prove them both wrong. Week by week, Sunday by Sunday, he would prove he was more than his worst mistakes. He would prove he was Harper's father. And maybe, somehow, he could prove to Melissa that the man who'd pushed her away 7 years ago had finally learned what mattered most. The weeks blended into a rhythm. Sunday afternoons at Diana's house, 2 hours of coloring and board games and stories, Harper's trust growing incrementally with each visit. Thanksgiving came and went. Brandon spent it alone in his apartment, eating takeout Thai food and video chatting with Rachel. Melissa sent him a photo that evening. Harper at Diana's dining table, wearing a paper turkey hat, grinning at the camera. The The caption read, "She asked if you celebrate Thanksgiving. I said yes. She said we should invite you next year." Next year. The casual promise of future, of continuity, made Brandon's eyes burn. December arrived with Portland's signature rain and early darkness. Harper started getting excited about Christmas. Her conversations dominated by speculation about whether she'd been good enough for Santa, what presents she might get, whether it would snow this year. During their fourth Sunday visit, she asked Brandon what he wanted for Christmas. "I don't really celebrate it," he said honestly. "I usually work through the holidays." Harper's eyes went wide with horror. "You work on Christmas, but that's when families are supposed to be together." "I don't really have family nearby," Brandon said, which was technically true. Rachel lived in Boston with her husband and 2 kids. His parents were in Arizona, and they'd been distant long before geographical miles separated them. Harper looked at Melissa, then back at Brandon, her small face thoughtful. "You could come to our Christmas, right, Mommy? If Brandon doesn't have family." Melissa froze. Diana stopped knitting. The weight of Harper's innocent invitation hung in the air, loaded with implications none of them were ready to address. "Harper, Brandon probably has other plans," Melissa said carefully. "But he said he works. That's not a plan. That's just sad." Harper turned back to Brandon, her expression earnest. "You should come. Grandma makes the best cookies, and we watch movies and open presents, and it's really fun." Brandon looked at Melissa, trying to communicate 1,000 things with his eyes. "I won't push. I'll say no if you want me to. But God, I want to say yes. I want to spend Christmas with my daughter." Melissa's jaw worked, emotions flickering across her face too quickly to name. Finally, she said, "Let me think about it, Harper. Christmas is still 3 weeks away." Harper nodded, satisfied that she'd done her job as host. She went back to their current project, making paper snowflakes, but the question lingered in the room, impossible to ignore. After Brandon left that evening, Melissa texted him, "I can't believe she invited you to Christmas. I don't know what to do." Brandon replied, "Whatever you're comfortable with. I meant what I said. I won't push. But if you're asking what I want to spend Christmas morning watching Harper open presents. I want to be part of your family, even if I haven't earned that right yet." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Let me talk to my mom and to Harper's therapist. If we do this, we need to do it right." A week later, Melissa called him. "Okay, Christmas Day. You can come for lunch and presents. But Brandon, this is a big step. Harper's going to start wondering why you're always around. The therapist says we should tell her soon. After Christmas, maybe. In January." Brandon's heart lurched. "Tell her I'm her father?" "Yes, she's old enough to understand, and she's already asking questions. It's time." Time. The moment he'd been both desperate for and terrified of since this all began. His daughter would finally know who he was, and then she'd have to decide if she wanted him in her life for real, not just as her mom's friend who showed up on Sundays. "Okay," Brandon said, his voice hoarse. "Whatever you think is best. I trust your judgment." "Do you? Because 7 years ago, you didn't trust me with anything." The hurt in her voice was a reminder that Melissa's wounds hadn't healed just because she was letting him spend time with Harper. If anything, his presence kept reopening them, forcing her to relive the worst period of her life. "I was wrong not to trust you then," Brandon said. "I was wrong about a lot of things. But Melissa, you're the best mother Harper could have. Everything you've done, every choice you've made for her, it's all been right. I see that now." Silence on the line. Then quietly, "Thank you. That means more than you know." Christmas morning arrived clear and cold. Mount Hood visible in the distance, its snow-covered peak glowing against a rare blue sky. Brandon drove to Diana's house with a trunk full of wrapped presents. Too many, probably, but he couldn't help himself. Books and art supplies, and a stuffed purple unicorn, and the easel Harper had mentioned wanting, the one she was saving her tooth fairy money to buy. Melissa had texted him that morning. "Mom says you bought an easel, Brandon. We talked about not going overboard." He'd replied, "I know, I'm sorry, but she mentioned it 7 weeks ago, and she's been saving for it, and I just want her to have it. Please let me give this to her. I'll scale back after this, I promise." "Fine, but nothing this big again without asking me first." When Brandon arrived, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and coffee. Christmas music played softly from a speaker. Harper answered the door wearing fleece pajamas covered in penguins and a Santa hat, her face bright with excitement. "You came. Mommy said you were coming, but I wasn't sure. Come see the tree. Santa came last night." She grabbed his hand, his daughter's small, warm hand in his, and pulled him into the living room, where a modest tree sparkled with lights and handmade ornaments. Presents spilled out from underneath, wrapped in mismatched paper with ribbons that looked hand-tied. Melissa stood near the kitchen in her own festive pajamas, coffee mug in hand, watching them with an expression Brandon was getting better at reading, cautious hope mixed with protective fear. Diana was in the kitchen, pulling cinnamon rolls from the oven, humming along to Silver Bells. "Merry Christmas," Brandon said to the room at large, suddenly feeling out of place in his jeans and sweater. Everyone else was in pajamas, comfortable and family-like, and he was the outsider trying to fit into a tradition that had existed long before him. But Harper was still holding his hand, pulling him toward the tree. "That one's from Santa, and that one, we have to wait for Aunt Teresa, but she's going to be here soon, and then we can open everything." Melissa's sister arrived 20 minutes later with her husband and 2 teenage daughters, and suddenly the house was full of noise and laughter and chaos. Brandon was introduced as Mom's friend Brandon, which earned him curious looks from Teresa, but no direct questions. They ate cinnamon rolls and fruit salad. They took pictures by the tree, and then finally, Harper was allowed to start opening presents. She approached each one with methodical care, reading the tags, shaking the boxes, trying to guess what was inside before tearing into the paper with gleeful abandon. Brandon had brought 6 presents, each carefully chosen. Art supplies, chapter books from the list Melissa had sent him, the stuffed unicorn. He saved the easel for last, and when Harper unwrapped it, squealing with delight when she realized what it was, Melissa shot him a look that said, "You're in trouble," even as she smiled at Harper's joy. "How did you know?" Harper demanded, throwing her arms around Brandon's waist in a spontaneous hug that nearly knocked him backward. "How did you know this is what I wanted most?" "You told me," Brandon said, his voice thick with emotion. His daughter was hugging him. His daughter was happy because of something he'd done. "You said you were saving for an easel, so now you can spend your tooth fairy money on something else." Harper pulled back, her face serious. "Thank you, Brandon. This is the best present ever, even better than what Santa brought." "Don't let Santa hear you say that," Diana called from the kitchen, and everyone laughed. They spent the rest of the morning in that warm, chaotic space, wrapping paper everywhere, Christmas music playing, Harper setting up her easel immediately and beginning to paint while adults cleaned up and talked and drank coffee that turned into mimosas that Brandon politely declined because he wanted to remember every moment of this with perfect clarity. This was what family felt like. This was what he'd been missing his entire life, what he'd been too scared to reach for. Belonging, connection, the messy, beautiful reality of people who showed up for each other. Around 2 p.m., after a lunch of leftovers and pie, Harper climbed onto the couch next to Brandon. She'd been painting all day, her fingers stained with purple and blue, her energy finally starting to wane. "This was a good Christmas," she announced, leaning against his side, with the casualness of a child who'd decided he was safe, maybe the best one. Brandon's arm came around her shoulders automatically, carefully, like holding something precious and breakable. "Yeah, kid, it really was." Across the room, he caught Melissa watching them, tears shining in her eyes. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw the conflict written across her face. This was what she'd wanted for Harper, what she'd feared Harper would never have. A father who showed up, a father who cared. But it also meant letting Brandon deeper into their lives, trusting him with the most valuable thing Melissa had, her daughter's heart. As the afternoon faded into evening and Brandon prepared to leave, Melissa walked him to the door. They stood on the porch in the cold December night, breath fogging in the air between them. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for today, for making her so happy. Thank you for letting me be here. The therapist wants to meet with us next week to discuss how to tell Harper. Are you available Tuesday evening?" "I'll make myself available." Melissa nodded, worrying her bottom lip. "Brandon, once we tell her, there's no going back. She'll know you're her father. She'll have expectations. She'll want more than Sunday afternoons and occasional holidays. I know, and I want that too. I want to be her father, not just her mom's friend. But what does that look like? Are you staying in Portland? Are you going back to San Francisco? Harper can't handle you being in and out of her life." It was the question Brandon had been avoiding, the logistical reality he'd been dancing around for weeks. His company was in San Francisco. His life, his apartment, his entire professional infrastructure was there. But his daughter was here. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I'll figure it out. Whatever it takes to be present for Harper, I'll make it work." Melissa searched his face, looking for cracks in his sincerity. "You promise?" "I promise." She nodded slowly, then did something that shocked him. She stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, almost businesslike, but her arms went around him and her cheek pressed against his shoulder for 3 heartbeats before she pulled away. "Don't make me regret this," she whispered. Then she went inside, leaving Brandon standing in the cold Christmas night, the warmth of her brief embrace still lingering on his skin. Inside, Harper was showing Diana her paintings, her voice bright with excitement, and Brandon realized with stunning clarity that this little girl, his daughter, had just given him the greatest gift he'd ever received, a chance to be part of something that mattered more than money or success or proving himself to the world, a chance to be her father, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure he didn't waste it.